Good day there, and welcome back to another episode of the Pugs on Drugs podcast. I'm your host, Skip, and I'm here today to talk about effects that the environment has on drugs. Last week, we went over a couple things. We went over the effect that timing has on drugs and a couple personal experiences with that. This week, we've got two new topics that I wanted to discuss. There's the topic of temperature and drug effects, and, well, there's a lot that can be decompressed from that. Well, the first bit is, what about you? If you're, say, hot, or if you're, say, feeling hot or cold, is that gonna have an effect on the drug's temperature? Or not of temperature, but effect? And, well, the answer might surprise you. I personally have had several situations where I've had to take a drug when I've either been in temperatures that were extremely hot or temperatures that were extremely cold. And I found that the change in effect was so drastic. Like when I took Advil when I was in an incredibly cold environment, the effect was very quick, but it didn't necessarily last that long. Whereas when I took it in a more warm environment or a neutral environment, it took a little bit longer for it to kick in. But at the same time, I also found that it was, well, more effective. It lasted longer. It had the desired effects. Another time when I had to take Advil when I was not feeling well in a hot environment, the effects were very, very slow to kick in and lasted quite a while though after once they finally had kicked in. And well, this is not ideal. What's this mean to us? Well, it points out a couple concerns. The concern that, well, temperature of the individual can affect the drug's effect. It's not going to have the desired effect potentially, or the instant effect that you need it to have. Like with the Advil, you want to, when you take Advil, you're looking for that relief. You're looking for that relief from pain. And if you can't get that as soon as you need it or when it's needed, is it really helping? And like stuff like that. It's not necessarily a positive effect when it's hot or cold for the individual. But looking beyond that, what about storage of the drugs? How many people store drugs in their car, store a bottle of Advil or something like that in their purse or in their car in the winter? Well, here it gets really cold in the winter. So when you take a step back and you look and see, well, the drug's been stored in your car for the day. Well, what's that mean? Let's say it's minus 30 outside and you have to administer it to someone who's in room temperature conditions. That's going to change how the drug affects. It's not going to be effective. It's not going to be as effective. It's not going to have the desired effects. And that's not good. This is also supported in some of the research that we assessed, where the study from Armenian and company looked in the effects that storing drugs at different temperatures has. And well, the results were quite shocking. They found that improper storage or improper temperatures for drug storage can result in greatly reduced quantities and greatly reduced effects of the drugs. A good example of this could be naloxone. Naloxone, when stored at improper temperatures, specifically in heat conditions, is lowered in the amount of the drug that it has. When stored in cold conditions, it has a more increased effectiveness, but that's not necessarily what we're looking for here. It changes its effectiveness. So storing a naloxone kit in the cold might make it more effective, but it makes it less reliable. You don't know if then suddenly, instead of having the individual who's likely going through an opioid overdose, which is what we usually use naloxone for, if you administer that, you could have them overdose on something else as well. Like it's a really big risk. Whereas in hot temperatures, it's shown to have a lower effectiveness. So it might not be enough to stop them from overdosing. And that's incredibly scary. And to make matters worse, when it's stored from a hot to a cold temperature, they found even greater reductions in the effectiveness of the drug. And the same for cold to hot temperatures. So let's say it was stored in your cold car and you brought it inside to administer in like 20-degree temperature. Suddenly you're looking at such a large drop off in the amount of effectiveness of these drugs. And that's scary. Like, do you really want to put your life in the hands of something that has varying effects? And that's where we're getting at here is, what does this mean to us? What is there anything we're going to be able to do? And I think there's validity in researching and finding out if there is something we can add on with this. Can we find ways of making drug storage kits that maintain the drug at a set temperature? Is that practical? Is it? Because looking at the results that they obtained here, the effectiveness of naloxone dropped when stored from cold to hot temperatures to only 40% effectiveness. And that's terrifying. I personally wouldn't want to be administered something that only has 40% effectiveness. That's not even half. That's not even half of the uses being effective. And that's personal experience, yeah, but I don't think anyone would. If you were told that there was a treatment and only had 40% effectiveness, would you really want to take that risk? Like, yeah, it might be the only way to save someone's life, but if it's only going to be 40% effective the time, like, it's a big risk and it's concerning. On top of that, they looked at some other drugs too. They looked at things like morphine, where they found decreased effectiveness again and decreased amount of the drugs. The drugs themselves were degrading in different temperatures. And like I said before, that's concerning. And maybe it's worth looking into, seeing what kind of things we can do to maintain drugs in their quantity and effectiveness. If there's ways we can create storages that are going to be better for the drugs. Or maybe even just having naloxone kits and stuff like that stored in proper temperatures. Have it so that buildings that are storing them are required to give information about proper temperature storage. Because if you're administering at the wrong temperature, who knows what's going to happen? It might not have any effect at all. It might overdose the person on the drug. And that's not something you want to see. And I gotta say, personally, I wouldn't want to risk it. But maybe that's just me. Anyways, we have a second topic we want to talk about today as well. And that one actually has to do with inpatient and outpatient treatments. So basically, what inpatient and outpatient treatments are is they're the treatment of individuals either in their home setting or in a rehabilitation style environment. A good example of this is, well, rehabilitation centers. They often do inpatient trials where they help people through addictions. A prime example of this is in the study we looked into earlier this week of Day and Strang. Day and Strang, they looked in to assess and see if there was an effect on inpatient versus outpatient treatments for opioids. And, well, their findings showed quite prominent results that there was a great increase in effectiveness of inpatient studies. When individuals were outside of their home environment, there was often improved effectiveness of treatment. And that says something about treatment, doesn't it? Like, you want to be at home, and I understand that. Most people, if they were doing rehabilitation, they want to be able to just go home. They don't want to be there. They want to get better immediately and go back to living where they were. But we discussed this in our class a little while ago, and there's been several times it's been brought up, is there's that tolerance. That word tolerance, what does it mean? Well, tolerance is when you become tolerant to the effect of a drug, which means the drug isn't as effective the more you take it. And there is a phenomenon known as location tolerance, or maybe not that, maybe that's not the exact words, but that's what it breaks down to is you build up a tolerance based on the location that you're taking a drug. And well, sometimes for some people, they take the drug at home. And let's say it was something like alcohol. We've all been out to a bar probably or had alcohol before. And if the individual was, say, an alcoholic recovering, like those in the study that we assessed from Brooks and company, that could be the fact that they've developed a tolerance at home. And so they can drink a lot at home and not feel anything. But as soon as they go out to the pub, it's 2 drinks in and they're done. Like, there's just that innate tolerance based on where you're taking a drug. And that's something that has such a large effect on individuals. Looking back to the Brooks and Company study, there was a lot that was gone over where they assessed individuals to see if there was benefit to being at home during the study or being in the inpatient trial. And they found once again the same findings that they did with Day and Strang. They found that there was an improvement in inpatient trials, but unless there was support from a community, they found that the effects just didn't last outside of the in-person. And that's honestly sad. And it's upsetting because you go through all the treatment through the in-person and you try your best to make things better, but ultimately it just comes down to there's only so much you can do. And unless you can build up that community environment, the community supports, there's not much we can do. And it's kind of sad. And maybe it's something we need to look into as a population. Looking into creating outreach groups. And I know we have things already like Alcoholics Anonymous and things like that, where you go and you can express yourself and have a group support. But ultimately, I feel like we need to have more emphasis on this because detoxification of this kind of thing is something that we could strive towards with these groups. We have already pre-established, pre-existing groups. And if we had those as more of a treatment, if they had people come in to help with treatment rather than just being a support group, maybe we could see improvements. And for things like the opioid detoxification, if you have, well, an inpatient trial, being able to have a support group that does some inpatient trials back in community environment, maybe that could be something that'll help. But we don't really know yet. And I mean, personally, I've never had issues with overdose or addiction to anything, but I've seen people go through this kind of stuff, and well, it's scary. It's not fun stuff to look at. And well, I want to see people get better, and I'm sure everybody wants to see people get better. But we can't have people getting better if we're not providing them the resources to get help or the way that they need to get help. And based on the study results, there was a great increase in the amount of success through inpatient. And while, yes, in both inpatient and outpatient groups, you see people always going back to the drugs, and it's heartbreaking seeing them go back after going through such a strenuous process to try and get themselves to be better, and then seeing them revert back. It's painful, but there's a lesser group that reverts back when they go through the inpatient trials. And unfortunately, in our day and age, this becomes an industry where big celebrities have been going through rehab and things like that, and suddenly it becomes a cash grab, and that's not what we need it to be. We talked about this last week in class. It's become such a large media outlet of just rehabilitation and coming back into society, and it's just heartbreaking. What used to be the way that we would treat people or the way that we would try to help people get better has just become an outlet for people to get money, and like, that's not what it's supposed to be. And I don't know, maybe I'm not seeing things through the right lens here, but if you ask me, it shouldn't be that way. we should be striving towards making society a better place, towards making people better people. And if doing that means having inpatient trials and having supports in communities, then that's what we should be doing. Because, well, I want to see things get better, especially in our COVID times that we've been in lately, where everything always seems to be just lurking around the corner. The next big variant comes out and suddenly we're back in lockdown again. It's just nice to sometimes have that extra bit of faith in humanity and that we can sometimes strive forward without falling back. And maybe if we try implementing this kind of thing in future studies, we'll see improvements and we'll see people getting better at not reverting back to their addictions. And I think that'd be an amazing thing to see. And well, that might be all the content that I have for today. I feel like leaving everyone with the question of, should we provide in-person services and resources for communities? Is there validity in having that? Because personally, I think there is, but I'll let you guys decide. Anyways, that's all I have for you guys this week. Take care, all.